in the meantime, please put your hands together and welcome Pip Hinman from the Stop the War Coalition.
Hi everyone, I wanted to also congratulate everyone for defying the police and the New South Wales government and coming out today. My voice is about to go, so I apologise in advance. Well, I'm here from Stop the War Coalition. Stop the War was a big part of initiating this protest today. And I want to ask you all here today to consider taking one of these, or to take one of these leaflets. Importantly, join Stop the War Coalition. Come along to our meetings and get involved in helping build the anti-war movement. Well, some of you might have been watching Lateline the other night when they interviewed the US Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice. She was trying to justify the war in Iraq. The people of Iraq, they just want the same thing as us. They want peace. They want security. They want freedom. That was her argument for the US occupation of Iraq. It's been the US government and the governments of other rich robber countries like Australia that have been denying the people of Iraq their freedom, their peace, their democracy. These rich and powerful governments have occupied and carved up this part of the world for centuries. They've funded dictators, they've propped up dictators, they've created chiefdoms when it suited them. And in the process, they've guaranteed the profits of big companies and the governments they serve. Now Condoleezza Rice and George Bush had the brazenness to tell us the US and its allies in Iraq are there to bring peace and democracy. Oh, bullshit. This is an absolute lie. Not only all of us know it's a lie, the majority of Australians know it's a lie. The majority of people in the US know it's a lie. The majority of people in the third world know it's a lie. And the Middle Eastern people know it's a lie. And the humanity of all of us. Well, I'm sure most people found it incredible when George Bush argued a week or so ago that the US should never have withdrawn from Vietnam. This is a war that made an indelible mark on generations of people. 1.5 million Vietnamese soldiers and freedom fighters were killed. 600,000 of them were wounded. 4 million Vietnamese civilians died in the US war on Vietnam. Recently I visited Vietnam, and most people you meet there today have a relative who has in some way was a casualty of that horrible war. I met victims of the Agent Orange, the dioxin, the poisons that the US dropped on Vietnam. It's affecting generation after generation after generation. The same thing as we know is going to happen in Iraq with the depleted uranium. And Bush dares to argue that the US should never have withdrawn from Vietnam. How many more people would have been killed in that terrible war? Well, we know that last year it was estimated that 650,000 Iraqis have already been killed in this illegal war. And unless we stop that war, these figures will rise. For the tens and thousands of people, the hundreds of thousands of people who marched for an end to the Vietnam War, for the withdrawal of the US and the Australian troops, were right to take that stand. And we are right to take the stand we're taking today. We are now marching to demand John Howard and George Bush take the troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan. We have justice, and we have morality on our side. And never forget, we are the majority. They are the minority. John Howard and George Bush are not carrying out the will of the majority, yet they pose as the leaders of the democratic free world. We know they have no respect for democracy. And we know Bush and Howard are dead men walking. That's why hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent on the security operation aimed at stopping Bush from seeing our banners, our placards and hearing our voices. That's why George Bush had to enjoy his trip to Sydney, apparently to address APEC, and yet he's in the biggest chicken run you've ever seen. Howard has tried desperately not to mention the war in Iraq through the whole APEC meeting. You would have seen his appearance on the YouTube. He didn't mention the war once. But then Bush came to town. And he said, no withdrawal, let's go nuclear. Well, hopefully Bush's APEC endorsement of John Howard's re-election bid makes the Howard government history. We can't afford to leave it to hope. The only guarantee the troops will be forced to withdraw from Iraq and Afghanistan and not be sent off to some other occupation is a strong and independent anti-war movement. That's what Vietnam has told us. That's what we have to take on board today, and that's what we have to go away from this protest determined to do, to build the anti-war movement in this country, to force John Howard to justice. John Howard must be voted out, and then we will hold the Labor government to account. The troops must be withdrawn from Iraq and Afghanistan. Thank you.